Do you ever get that gnawing feeling that there are places from your past that are better left alone? Well, if you've ever thought about going back to your childhood home just for one last look, this story might make you reconsider, because sometimes what you leave behind is waiting for you. Some people say that our memories of childhood are like time capsules, places that don't just hold our past, but hide pieces of ourselves. This is the story of how I went back to my old home, a place I thought I knew, only to find something dark and familiar waiting there for me. If you've ever wondered what might still linger in those places we left behind, buckle up, because this story just might keep you awake tonight. It all started with a simple drive down memory lane, literally. I was in town on business, the first time in years, and as I sat in traffic, I got this strange idea to drive by the old neighborhood where I grew up. I had heard they were planning to demolish a lot of the old houses for new developments, and this strange sudden urge came over me. I thought, why not go back, just for one last look? Maybe I was hoping to feel some of that old familiarity, to revisit some small part of myself I felt slipping away over the years. But as I drove down that quiet street, lined with trees that seemed so much taller and darker than I remembered, something felt off. The house was still there, standing crooked and alone at the end of the cul-de-sac. It looked smaller somehow, like a worn-down relic of a past life. I parked on the curb, and that's when I noticed the windows. They were pitch black, like empty eyes, staring straight at me. I could feel the weight of them, and this cold shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't explain it, but as I got out of the car and walked towards the house, it felt like I was being drawn in, like something in that dark shell of a home was pulling me back. The door was slightly ajar, hanging loose on its hinges. I stepped inside, and immediately it was like I'd entered a completely different world. The air was heavy, thick, almost damp, as if the house itself had been holding its breath for years, just waiting for someone to come inside. Every step I took echoed down the empty hallways, louder and more unsettling than it should have been. I passed by the living room, glancing at the spot where my family's old sofa used to sit. It was empty now, but I could almost hear the faint laughter of my younger self, a ghost of a sound lingering in the silence. But something else lingered too, a feeling, or maybe a memory I couldn't quite place. I felt this eerie sense of being watched as I walked deeper into the house. The shadows seemed to stretch and grow, darkening the corners in ways that didn't make sense. It was like the house had been absorbing darkness for years, feeding on it, growing thicker with it. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Just a flicker, a flash of movement in the dim hallway to my left. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty darkness, or so I thought. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint at first, but unmistakable. My name. I froze. It felt like someone had reached inside me and squeezed my heart, sending chills straight through me. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, maybe an echo of an old memory, but it sounded too real, too close. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw something standing at the end of the hallway. It was a shadow, dark and featureless, but as I stared, I started to make out details. It was about my height, my shape, even my build, but it wasn't right. It looked twisted, distorted, as if someone had stretched and warped a reflection of me, leaving it hollow, with eyes that were empty and endless. It took a step forward, and I felt this cold wave of dread wash over me. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in place as it moved closer. And then it smiled. A slow, unnatural smile, twisting across a face that wasn't fully formed. It was like watching a nightmare come to life, something impossible and yet undeniably real. The more I stared, the more I began to recognize it. It was me. Or at least, it had been me once upon a time. I saw myself as a child, my old clothes, my old haircut. Even the look of wonder I used to have before life wore it away. But the eyes, those eyes were hollow, dark, as if they'd been emptied of everything human. I could barely breathe. My mind was racing, but my body felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot by this unexplainable force. And that's when I felt it, a tug, deep inside me, like a piece of myself was trying to break free, drawn towards this twisted shadow of my past. I fought it, but it was like wrestling with a dream. The harder I tried to pull away, the stronger the pull became. The shadow moved closer, and that's when I noticed it wasn't just a reflection of my past self. It was something else, a part of me I had left behind, a fragment of my own fear, my regrets, my pain. It was everything dark I'd tried to bury, all the parts of myself I didn't want to face, staring back at me. And I realized it wanted to replace me. It wanted to take everything I was, everything I had become, and consume it, like a parasite feeding on its host. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The silence was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides. And then, just as it reached out towards me, something snapped. I felt a rush of adrenaline, a primal instinct to survive kicking in. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding down the hallway as the shadow's laughter echoed behind me, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. I don't remember how I made it out. My memories of that moment are a blur of fear and adrenaline, but somehow I found myself outside, gasping for breath under the night sky. The house stood silent and still behind me, as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. I could feel it, this cold emptiness inside me, like something had been taken. A piece of myself was left behind in that house, and I knew it was waiting there, watching from the shadows, waiting for someone else to come looking. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that part of me is still trapped in that house, staring out from those dark windows, watching, waiting. So if you ever feel the urge to go back, to revisit the places you've left behind, be careful, because sometimes what we leave behind doesn't just fade away, it waits and it remembers. As I moved through the house, each room seemed to breathe with its own kind of darkness. In the kitchen, the floor was scattered with remnants of my childhood, old toys, forgotten drawings, little pieces of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The shadows seemed to cling to these items, wrapping around them like vines, as if the house was trying to keep them trapped in its walls. I picked up a small dusty figurine, one I'd forgotten about, and suddenly a memory hit me. It was like a vision, flashing in and out of my mind, a dark night, this same room, and a voice whispering in the darkness, a voice that sounded like mine, but twisted. If you're still watching, subscribe for more chilling stories like this one.